Hey everyone, thanks for joining us. Before we get started, I just want to make sure I can be heard. If you would do me a favor, if somebody could type in the say something nice just to make sure I'm not talking into space here. And I'm going to make sure audio is working. Chase, Rebecca, team, are we okay on audio at the moment? For those that might be able to hear me. Oh, I hear you. Okay, excellent. Oh, it was just a lag. Thank you guys. Appreciate the feedback. Well, welcome everyone to our webinar, Build Trust by Delivering Content Your Customers Really Want, led by our strategic services team. And wanted to call out, this is actually our first webinar from our strategic services group. So throughout today, you'll get a deep look into our engagements, what's going on now, big and global deployments where teams are trying to include the customer's voice, build trust, and give them what they really want. Just making sure our audio is okay. We're okay? All good now. Okay. Thank you. We appreciate the people helping us out a little bit. If in case it was a little bit of overlap, just a quick explanation. What Tom's going to walk us through today, it's not so much research or academic work, but things that we're doing every day. Teams looking at trust as a differentiator, and that question of, do people trust us, and how do we prove it? So as we all work through the challenges of adapting to today's new normal, more and more conversations and touch points are taking place virtually. But are you providing your customers the information and resources they really want? So if you're not collecting their explicitly provided preferences at the most appropriate moments along the customer journey, chances are you're missing the mark. So we're here to help navigate these challenges for our customers and non-customers alike. And we're pleased to share our expertise around leveraging preference collection best practices to improve your communication effectiveness, enhance those relationships with your customers, and ultimately build trust with your customers and prospects. I'm Phil Trapani with Possible Now, and we're joined today by our Practice Director for Strategy and Consulting, Tom Fricano. And just a quick reminder, at the end of Tom's presentation, we'll have a Q&A session. I know you guys can see it on the right-hand side in the Say Something Nice. There's also that in white letters, ask a question. So either of those places are good to ask your questions to us. As they come in, we will keep track of them. And towards the Q&A at the end, we'll make sure we go through those. Tom, from here, the floor is yours. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thank you, Phil. And thank you, everyone, for joining today. I'm Tom Fricano. I head our strategic consulting group. And I'll do a little bit of level setting on preferences, on trust, and then we'll get into some best practices. But I wanted to start a little bit, and I think anybody that goes into the personalization space, really understanding at the heart of it, how we all look at it, our particular why statement here is really, we're here to empower the individual's voice so that you're building trust and you're enriching those relationships. And that's really the premise of not only our business, but today's webinar. So we'll cover, what our customer preferences to level set. We'll talk about why preferences are vital for marketing success, how qualitative research comes into this, and truly listening to what the customer wants and how they feel about things. We'll talk, again, in the meat of this, preference collection and best practices. Also, we want to talk a little bit about avoiding common pitfalls, both with trust and with how you collect. And then how do you create a plan forward? So we know these things. How do I do it in my organization? And to Phil's point in the introduction, we didn't want this just to be a regular webinar, but share what we see every day in our consulting engagements and how we're helping big brands, big global brands with a lot of complexity, and how we're recommending what they should do for their organizations and how their brand builds trust. So moving into preferences, when you think about it, preferences can be a lot of things, but in this case, what we're talking about are those particular things that people want from us, things that you've said, I'm going to offer you this, and they find it compelling to opt in to something. So they are giving you explicit opt-in information and data around them. These could be opting into newsletters, product interests, promotions, alerts, activity type notifications, and in different channels, right? There's a media mix that people expect to be communicated in and around as they interact with your brand. So it's important to know that this just isn't about email or texting, but really where the customer's at with all these different media capabilities out there. So this is an interesting slide. It's something that we learned in one of our engagements years ago. And when we talk about information and how you interact with your customers, there's a huge base of contact information. We get it from our CRM systems. We get them from other databases we have in the company. We have lots of information on their purchases and transactions. And as we go up the pyramid, this information gets tougher and tougher to get. But by and large, you can get it, buy it, use it from your different platforms. But preferences are so important because it's the one piece of data that you have to ask your customers for. It's really that gold set that allows the customer to tell us what they want, when they want it, how they want it, and according to their preferences. So we put it right up there at the top, and it's why it's worth thinking about and coming up with strategies. Really, we want to use this information to create high value interactions across every point of contact in every department within your company. We want high value interactions across all the media mix elements that a customer has access to, or a person. We want those high quality interactions maintained throughout the relationship. So this isn't when you're just selling somebody, but throughout that journey. So once they're onboarded and the sale's over, how do I keep them engaged? How do I keep that trust in place? And then, of course, understanding what individual needs are. And preferences can help with that. But really, at the end of the day, it allows us to have highly personalized customer experiences. Now, although we're not here to talk about what's going on with the pandemic, this is a quote from Hernan Roman. For those of you that know him, he's a Direct Marketing Association Hall of Fame and voice of the customer expert. But he's got a quote that, really what we're learning through this is just how high expectations were and how this particular situation is pushing those expectations even higher. And so at this point, it's really an opportunity for us as marketers and brand people to demonstrate that authentic understanding. I mean, people are going through a lot, showing empathy, understanding how they feel, and really a creative use of what we have in a digital perspective to really start building that person-to-person interaction. And it's really a shift. And I think a lot of us as marketers and brand people know there's still a gap for us to get there. And, I think that's the change that we're all going to see going forward. But when you look at preferences and why they're important and why it's so important to really start to get to know your customers is, number one, there's this chasm between the fantasy of what we as marketers and brand people think is going on and what our customers and what people really experience. And, that's in lies, the big problem. How do we bridge that? The second component is, again, how consumers have this really high level of expectation. And when it comes to their, customer experience, they just want more and more. And I think we all know as people, when we're interacting with brands, if a company fails to meet that expectation, it's really easy, or at least it puts a person in a position of starting to look for another company. One of the things in a recent Voice of the Customer research project on behalf of a number of top tier brands really found that the value, the strength, the depth, and integrity, and the quality of the relationship is what keeps customers loyal and engaged. The next thing is, and even though there's privacy concerns out there today, and I think we all know that there's a lot of room for improvement, but everybody's focused on it, is people are still willing to provide some really deep information about themselves for the promise of better personalization and customization. So we have to keep that in mind as well. One of the things that, from an email standpoint, you should consider is, keeping subscribers actively engaged with your email program is a major factor in deliverability and overall success. So you want to keep them engaged. You want to know, you want it personalized to the extent you can. And I think we all know that a lot of consumers, they just don't trust that their opt-out requests are being processed. So what we're seeing is that instead of opting out with you, they simply, use some sort of blocking mechanism. And that's unfortunate because we lose control as marketers, and it really removes important metrics in traditional reporting to know what's going on. And for the last point, and we'll talk about this, but there's several key points along the customer life cycle, and it's pretty much across all industries. We'll talk about it a little bit later, where people expect high value engagement, and how we can rise to that. But when we say all of this, it's pretty clear what we have to do. It takes a commitment from an organization, often a cultural change, a holistic view of the customer experience, and changing in your mindset, more of from a me-wide mindset to a we mindset. And so if we want to do this, how do we achieve this high value engagement with the customer, or really the individual? And really, we need to understand that person, that individual, and what they want at every stage of their relationship with your company. And if you think about it, we're not just moving to opting in and opting out of things, but people, they want you to know them and their unique circumstances. You can opt into certain information and notifications, but what if you have a mom and she's got a young kid, she's got a career, and loves to shop, but just doesn't have time to do all the research. You'll see companies like Stitch Fix and Gilt and things like that. Well, they really get to know you at a deep level, not just your size and dimensions, but where you are in your life right now, what's important and what can be convenient. There's people that want you to help them achieve their goals. Whether, say, like if I'm working with a bank or a brokerage, what are my financial goals? Or if I'm dealing with a health insurance company, what are my health goals? So it takes a deeper knowledge and a trusted relationship that the person is absolutely willing to give you, as long as you honor those preferences, their privacy, you're responsible about it. Also, what about those companies where people really want to maximize the value out of the products you have to offer? Some of us have complicated products, and frankly, customers, as much as we'd like to think they know our policies and how we work, they often don't. So how do we help them understand how to maximize what they bought from us? There's the idea of being proactive, so thinking about time and what you know about that person. So the example there could be where having that information and knowing an event has happened, whether it's promotional stuff, things about products, or a change. How do you know that a company's got your back? Well, by providing timely, proactive information, maybe about orders, maybe about backlogs. It could be a number of things, but let that person know you're on their side. And then, once in a while, people like to be recognized. They like to be appreciated. So how do you demonstrate as a company, that you care? And we're looking also at moving from, being a very transactional, company-centric mindset and moving more towards customer-centric. So when you're moving from transactional to relational, just from an example, it's, going from a mindset of what we want to sell as a company versus what our customers want to buy. Understanding that maybe we offer things in email and direct mail, but really there's more media to be considered. And so things like that. And when you get to this point, there's different benefits to you as a company and to us as individuals when you can have that heightened experience you have this information. The customer can get tailored promotions. It's not that they don't want to hear from you. It's just that maybe you're just not being relevant, right? So more relevant communications, a more efficient and effective customer experience. What do I mean by that? Well, if I have information, we all know that with certain companies, you have to repeat information on a form, repeat information when you call. But if I have that information, our processes should show them that we know who they are. Maybe pre-filling a form or having that information at your fingertips versus having to step through it a second or third time. You'll have better loyalty growth and program response and improved customer support because now people in the organization can serve that customer better. And as a company, we often see that when you have higher engagement, higher trusted relationships, you're going to see an increase in sales. It's absolutely proven that by having that trust and that somebody's comfortable, that you're going to see an uptick in those areas. Also, cost savings. Having more efficient experiences might reduce the need to call a call center or go through other costly measures. Avoiding regulatory penalties. A lot of us know that we can't just simply communicate in some of these channels. We have to have explicit consent and opt in. So we know that's a difficult thing to obtain. But when somebody trusts you, the likelihood of adoption and getting more of those types of opt-in really go up. And I'd even say that we see sometimes double-digit and triple-digit growth by doing this. So improved program efficiency. You look at if somebody trusts you and you have tough times like we're going through now, the companies that are still maintaining those relationships are because people trust the company. So you have this idea of creating a more durable relationship. So as things happen that we can't necessarily control, that trusted relationship can go a very long way with your customers. And then right now, what we're seeing is, having trust and personalized experiences. It's really a competitive differentiation between companies and their competitors. So I want to talk a minute about just the role of qualitative research and specifically voice of the customer. And this is really a process of capturing those critical details about a person. How they feel, what are their desires, what's their unique circumstance, what are their needs, what other requirements do they have, and really giving you that deep understanding of the individual. So, you may say that as you look at say you run a survey and you get some quantitative data and you realize that somebody's has reported like, gosh, every time I deal with you, I have to give my information to you 2 or 3 times. Okay, well, qualitative research allows you to get into that data even further, meaning, well, wouldn't you like to know what's behind that? Why do people feel that way? What's the collateral damage to your brand or your process by continuing to let that go on? And people will tell you all of this information if you simply listen to them and get to that deep understanding, that emotional, how they feel, and they'll tell you that. So that's different than what quantitative research tells you. The two of them combined is really powerful. So I can take what I know and I know why they feel that way. So now I can start to do something about it. So it's really, from a cultural perspective, it's an outside-in approach, meaning outside from the customer into your organization. And really using that approach to understand your customers and what they want. I'd also argue, and we talk to our clients about this all the time when they're saying, hey, that takes time and money. It's really a drop in the bucket when you think about your brand, the years it's taken to build, and you're just going to kind of rely or guess on inferential data. Why not, before you roll something out to millions of people, take a short pause, get this research to solve and fix problems, or before you launch a new product. And again, you're getting those deep insights that'll help you determine your data strategy for your profile data, your preference, and your consent management. So when you start to say, well, talk about trust for a minute, How do I enrich those? Why is it transformational? And it comes down to, the people in your organization, your processes, your technology, and more importantly, your culture. And where we're starting at, let me give you a data point. So there was a recent Accenture study of 25,000 global consumers, and they found that of customers who switched companies in the past year, 46% did so because they lost trust in that company. So that's a pretty big number, and it doesn't speak well of us as companies in general until we build that trust. And obviously, the more people trust, the more they're going to stick with you and buy. But really, where it starts is really knowing your customer, that getting that qualitative research, understanding on a personal basis with a deep understanding. And let me challenge you with this. So how can you personalize something if you don't know who that person is or what's important to them? So that's why I think, that qualitative voice of the customer research is so important to know before we start building processes and technologies in order to relate to people. The next in things is people have to know that their data is being responsibly taken care of, right? So is it secure? Who are you sharing it with? Are you being responsible with this information that I'm giving you? And transparency kind of comes on top of that because you want to let a person know what you have and how you deal with it. Xbox Live and Microsoft has a great portal that it's remarkable the data that they collect from gaming and the relationship through that whole Microsoft experience, but actually has the sets of data and the preferences. It's there, but I know what they're collecting, why they're collecting it, where it's being collected. And that's where even preference centers can come into play on preferences, because I can see what I've opted into, what I've opted out of, and other things that's available to me. So it really gives that genuine control to a consumer, to that person, so they can change things as they go. Sorry, I'm going the wrong way. And then the other important thing is, okay, now we've established that you know me, that you're going to take care of my data, and you've proven it. But now I have to do what I said. So it's really that golden rule. Do what you say you're going to do. Don't collect preferences or make a promise that you're not going to honor. The other part is what about the rest of your experience? What about your website? What about the timing and the urgency of certain messages? Are you sending the right message in the right channel with the right content that it asked you for? Are you being proactive? So it's not just about data and trust, but what's the expectations, and where else am I seeing this in your organization? And at the top of this, if I do all of this right, then delivering personalized experience, as in with communication preferences, you're going to build and reinforce trust and that partnership with your customer. So as we start to shift into, collecting and building this trust and getting people more comfortable so they share more, when you look at preference management, there's really 4 major components, right? There's the central system of record that the organization can pull data from and store data to. The reason that's important is because so many companies today are operating in silos, and it really forces that fractured experience with your customers. Spot collection is really where there's that opportunity to collect a preference for something of value that your customer wants. There's the preference center itself, or some people will call it a dashboard, which is kind of that control center where people can go in and see their preferences and other things. And then an opt-down strategy. So think of this as that unsubscribe mechanism that we all have, but we want to avoid the global opt-outs and keeping that channel open. So in today's session, we're going to focus on what are those best practices for collecting that in today's environment. We're going to be looking at driving engagement and personalize off of this data that we have. So in order to drive that engagement, some of the things we want to think about as marketers is, how do we personalize this? So how often, consumers want to be communicated with. What do they want to be communicated about? And ensuring that the why of the communication is in line with their individual needs. And every customer is different. And so what the basis of preferences is, well, let's do something different. Let's go ahead and ask them. So when we're looking at what to collect, there's really 5 requirements around engaging customers and providing that. So there's creating the trust that we talked about, there's being responsible, there's honoring their preferences, there's providing value, and you got to do it consistently. That's a key point. Don't just do it in 1 or 2 spots as you're maturing your capabilities over time. Make sure it's consistent. So when we're looking at what to collect, you want to leverage what you gain from your research, and then also from your ongoing operations. That's the other data, what you know. The next thing is to conduct what we call a taxonomy exercise. So we want to take a look at all the different preferences that we're going to offer, how they're categorized, how they're defined, so the customer, A, understands what they're signing up for, and B, is compelled, if the reason's correct, to opt into things. And this is for different people too. You might have different segments, but the taxonomy is important because it helps you as an organization really get your preferences lined up, how people are going to see them, and get them categorized. And we want to identify and prioritize where and when to collect preferences, right? So, we talked earlier about, what are those key steps, if you remember that chasm slide at the beginning. And there's really 7 areas, right? There's purchasing, there's onboarding. That's a great place. You think about, how do you respond, create an anticipatory response if you're seeing that you're getting decreasing engagement, maybe not as many visits, maybe not as many opens. You're seeing areas where you're losing engagement. How are you going to respond to negative experiences? What are you going to do to maybe surprise, the customer, kind of show them, hey, I care, here's a little something, so that surprise and delight. There's always the opportunity at value added and cross-selling and upselling, and then personalized repeat sales and renewals. So we can all look at those areas because they're key almost across any industry. But now if you say, well, gosh, Tom, I really need some more, I need some more data on how to do this as we're doing it, because we've identified 42 different preferences. How do I know which ones to do first, right? And I'm just throwing 42 out as just a number here. But when we talk about intensity of the customer experience and weighting this, what I mean here is, at that point of collection, it reflects a meaningful and significant experience for your customer, right? So you can put a score on that. The next might be business impact, right? We don't just do things to do them. We're either hoping to reduce cost, increase revenue, boost our loyalty programs, whatever that business impact is that we find of value. Of course, there's the brand promise. So what are those things that, by engaging in this and collecting here, does it help us with our brand? So we see different brands on TV, you're in good hands, we're here every step of the way, so on and so forth. But are we really, in this moment, is there the opportunity to promote that brand? There's volume. So does this particular area impact a high number of customers? And then opportunity to improve. So this is when we're evaluating, does this particular point of collecting offer an opportunity to provide a noticeably improved customer experience? So this is a way to kind of guide and help prioritize what areas you might collect first. You want to kind of get the most bang for your buck. So in some of the best practices that we get into, progressive preference collection. So meaning that as you're along the journey, and people are looking for information, or there's a good spot, there's a good reciprocity of value or a fair value exchange. Maybe it's convenience driven. Take the opportunity to collect that along the way. The other thing is, and this is a good example with health insurance, giving the opportunity to set a preference that's going to provide proactive information. Whoops. Excuse me. So I know this is a little difficult, but if you put yourself in the shoes of trying to get into a healthcare portal, navigate to go look at your deductibles or out-of-pocket expenses, I have to, remember my password, log in, navigate, and get there. And every time I want that information, I got to do the same thing. But what if I offered a preference that when my deductible changed or there was, I'm getting close to a maximum, why not send me an email or an alert? Not that undifferent than a credit card notification, right? Tell me when it's being used. Tell me if I'm close to limits, right? And also, what about, collecting, about receiving reminders in that spot collection there. So texting things to phone numbers and so on. So that provides that proactive information that might be convenient and time saving for me, because you're telling me as things happen, I don't have to go and think of it and go through all that trouble to go navigate and find it again. Again, micro moments, looking at these areas along the journey to collect. The name of the game in preference management is collecting data, building trust. And I can only do that is if I'm getting data consistently and across every step of the journey. So as we look at that, look at those different moments where the customer's looking for information and there might be an opportunity to get them to opt into something. So the high value content, this is where getting to know a person is really important, because if you look at this example, this says built for moms, right? It's an example. It's a public example from UHG. And what's interesting here is it's not that you know that I'm a mom, but you know that I have kids. And I'm going to provide specific data or communications and tips and maybe services around that, because I know as a busy mom, you might want some support, right? So it's much more compelling. It's contextual, it's specific, and there's a high reciprocity of value here for somebody that's looking for that information. You wouldn't know this unless you conducted the research in order to put this out there. So again, tying the research back to it. You do want to look at those other channels. Again, we talked about media mix. So how does a customer want to receive information today? And how do we prepare for that later down the road? There's certain incentives, and I don't want to talk just general here, but in some cases, we know that people are driven by cost savings or by money. And so the message might be different to somebody like that. There's convenience messages as well. People who don't want to go through the trouble, they don't care, just give me that information or provide that service to me no matter what the cost. And another example might be somebody who is really environmentally conscious. That's a big push these days, and people make decisions on it. They make buying decisions on it. They make brand relationships on it. So what's their incentive, and how do we do that? Again, research will tell us that. Now, when we look at specific best practices on the interface, this is just kind of an example we had, I think, of a webinar, but you really want to avoid jargon. You want to speak plainly and what's going to resonate with your customer. Again, we might like to think that our customers know everything about us and they're never going to leave us and all of that. But if we're using jargon, it's going to make it more difficult to appeal to those folks. And let's talk in their terms, not in ours. We want to have consistent UIs. I know that good UI, people understand these things, but the more consistent it is across these interactions, the more comfortable people feel. They think that you care about them. You're thinking of them every step of the way when you're creating these experiences. Having compelling descriptions. Now, this might sound a little crazy, but you wouldn't believe the amount of companies that take shortcuts for important initiatives. One of probably the most prominent ones we see is people that like to go to paperless, right? They're trying to cut costs, postal and print and all of the operations behind it. And I can't tell you how many times that companies will just say, go green. There's no explanation. There's no requirements. They don't know what they're going to get if they go green. They don't know what's going to happen if they try to opt out of it? And what happens if I do? Right. So we want to make sure that our descriptions are worthy of the action that we're asking these customers to take. The other thing is avoiding form fatigue. Only ask for the information you need at that point in time. Tell people why you're asking for that information in the data. Too many times we just want to skip that, but not everybody understands why you may be asking for it. And it's really just a simple step and a simple addition, so customers understand why you're doing that. And for folks that market into the European Union, under the GDPR guidelines, these things almost have to be done just as a form of being compliant. And then, of course, make sure you're still doing responsive design. Make sure you have a form factor. What we're seeing today in many of our engagements is when people are going down the preference route or even apps, everything is starting mobile first just because it's so prevalent and it's now becoming the primary device for so many people, and the number just keeps growing. So that mobile experience is often where people focus first, and then they back into the more richer desktop experience. This is an example when you start to look at different areas in your experience for where might you collect. So logging into a portal, for instance, when we look at this, we're looking for ways to help with the customer experience, but not redesign all of these things that you guys have spent hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars building. So if we take a look at a portal, it's got a lot of information on it. What might we do to get to collection? So they have a kind of a carousel thing here. Well, what if we get alerts and reminders here and give that content of what they're going to get and why they want to? So payment alerts, appointment reminders, immunization, medication reminders, or whatever those might be for the organization, but try to slot these in where it makes sense. And one of the tools that we use is called a playbook. And as you're going through all these different experiences, you want to document them and find out what the opportunity is. So for instance, identify where in the journey, what stage are they working in? Is it awareness on the shopping side, or is it engagement and retention? And going left to right, where you see preference collection opportunities, you can list that, hey, I'm going to put in this particular spot, I can get appointment reminders, I can get notifications, I can have them sign up for health and wellness. What are my tactics? So when you think about that, how am I going to convey that value, build that trust, let them know clearly what they're going to get if they opt in or share information with you? And then as far as a methodology, that's important because you want consistent UI experiences, and not just digital, but it could be in a phone system, interaction with a customer service rep. What is that method you're going to do to collect that information, and how do you keep it consistent along the way? So as you look at these different spots, you'll find that it's good to document it. Now, when we do these playbooks, I've yet to do one that is under 100 pages. And customers often say, Tom, man, that's a lot of preferences. Well, it could be, right? But we're identifying where all of them could be, collected. So having a playbook, being able to use that to document and communicate back into the business is really a best practice, and you really won't regret doing it when it comes time to lay out a roadmap for your preference program. We talked briefly about complying with regulations. Please understand that as you guys are out there, and again, a lot of you already know this, but what's that compliant disclosure language if I'm in a different country, if I'm in the European Union? What if I'm in Canada? What about California and the CCPA? What about collecting mobile numbers, right? You need to be aware of that, and you need to make sure that the interfaces clearly have that. So as we start getting closer to wrapping up here, and I appreciate everybody sticking in here, there's some pitfalls that we want to share with you so you can avoid these. So in the trust area, don't ever assume that your customers understand your products and policies, because they don't, or in many cases they don't. Don't assume that you know everything you need to know about your customers. Unless you've done research and you operate that way, you really can't assume that, because I'll challenge anybody to prove me otherwise. The other assumption is, a lot of people think, hey, our customers love us, they need us, and they'll never leave you. Well, I will say, unless you nail number one and number two here, you're making a false assumption. Now, some of the other pitfalls are a little bit more in the UIs. So don't take content or UI shortcuts. If it's worth doing, if you're putting that out in front of a person, make sure that they understand those things. Again, we talked about using company or industry jargon. Really speak like a person. If you were having the conversation around the dinner table with your mom or explaining it to your kid, you're probably not going to throw a bunch of acronyms at them. Don't provide too many preference options. If you have too many out there at one time and people get fatigued, when they're confused, they just say no and they shut it down. And the research and the testing proves that. Don't ask for more information that's necessary. Even the regulations out there recommend data minimalization and not collecting. Don't dismiss the regulatory requirements. There's a lot of them out there. Many of us are subject to them. And this is an interesting thing. Many people, once they start working with preferences, one of the first things they want to do is advertise, hey, come to the preference center and set your preferences. Well, I don't know about you guys, but I didn't wake up this morning thinking about setting my preferences with anybody. And I do this stuff all day long. So it's really about the value you create, not the technology, not the tool that enables it. So it's more appropriate to have specific campaigns that are going to drive value based on what your customers told you they wanted back through the research. So, and just kind of wrapping up here and talking about the plan forward, we know that customer insights are vital. We want to conduct external research with our customers and also look at what we have internally, because the two of them, combined are powerful. Getting organized, conducting that taxonomy exercise, basically what preferences and categories are we going to offer? Do your playbook, where are we going to collect them, and determine your in-context offers. So again, knowing the current situation. Really designing your preference collection and leveraging these best practices. And then track your success, measure what's working, what's not. Getting internal buy-in, proving that this works in your organization, and continue to expand it and adopt it. So again, your company is offering your customer what they want when they want, regardless of what area of the company that they're touching at the time. And keep in mind that with preferences and building trust, it's really simply asking that customer what's important to them and then delivering on it. So with that, that kind of wraps up the information I have today, and I think we're going to go into the Q&A part now. So let me know if we have any questions.
Yeah, nice work, Tom. Thanks for the overview. I know we've seen a couple of questions start to come in, and at this point, Tom is 1 minute ahead, and that's enough time for us to probably squeeze in one extra question. So we see a couple of here. Want to make sure we do address those, and I'll start to read them, and Tom and I could answer them, to the best we can. And we certainly want to talk through the offer we have in follow up to this time with these listeners with us today. And then finally, we want to talk about the next topic. We're covering some exciting things in the next couple of weeks going into July. And we certainly want to make sure those that are still on with us get that information. So we'll start with a few questions. We do encourage them as you guys think of those. There's that Ask a Question tab that you can click on, type in your question, and then our team will make sure we get that answered. But Tom, I like where we're headed here. We've got a couple, and I want to make sure we address those first before we get into some of the others. But to start, is there a method to measuring trust?
There are. There's a number of studies out there, primarily by some of the big consulting companies, but there is. And generally what that starts with is understanding what the customers want and having that profile. And that profile might include data that they've provided you. It may include specific transactions or things that they've done to engage. So as you think about a profile and what you would say, hey, this is an ideal customer. If they just did this, 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 and this, and that is the customer we want. So you turn that into a profile. And as you collect that, you can measure, am I getting a higher degree of engagement? And what's it worth? And there's really two sides to that. There's what's it worth to you as a company. So you would weight those things based on what you think is important. And then you would also put a weight on what you think the customers are important, because I've never seen them align until you really get to this point of progressive profiling and actually delivering on it. So you get two different weights based on those engagement touch points. I hope that answered the question.
I think so. Thank you. Question 2, when determining where and when to collect preferences, are all of those factors equal, or do they have different levels of importance? Long question. Did you get it?
Yeah,
Okay.
I think so. And I think that refers back to the area where we talked about what are those things that are there. So the volume the volume, meaning it touches a lot of people. What's the business value? What's the brand value? So yes, typically, and if you guys could visualize this, it's a spreadsheet and you have those values in there and you put weights on them, right? So you can weight things more towards the customer experience that you want, and so on. So some of those carry a higher weight. And when you look at the values at the end of that exercise, it really becomes very, very clear on what set of preferences should you be going after first.
Okay, good deal. Good deal. Well, I know we've got a couple of questions, and just before we get to those, we want to allow for some other people to ask some. So I'm going to jump into the free offer real quick. I know you guys can see it on your screen here, and it's a powerful one. So if those that are in attendance today have the interest to discuss their unique situation, what they've got going on from a preference collection or maybe lack of preference collection standpoint, we want you to have the opportunity to schedule time with us. So we've offered 30 minutes to connect with our team. Tom may or may not be there. I'm just kidding. Tom will be there. We'll make sure that happens. And there's info@possiblenow.com. You can also email me directly, ptrapani@possiblenow.com, or T for Kano. So good luck with the spelling, and we'll make sure you guys get that contact information as we send this recording out afterwards. So that's the first piece. The second is you heard Ron, I'm jumping the gun a little bit. You heard Tom talk about Ernan Roman early on in this presentation. Ernan is a plethora of knowledge. He's got a lot of good detail. We're excited to have him a part of this next webinar we're going to be doing. The topic here, transforming trust through deep customer experience, voice of customer research, and insights. So our team just did a great job. And as I was speaking of it, you can click this green box down at the bottom, next webinar, Transforming Trust, and it'll sign you right up and you'll have that on your calendar. I'm going to look to our team. Are there any other questions, team, that we may have missed? There are. Okay, good. Let's see what we got here, and this will probably put us up to our time. So, Tom, I'm going to pick your brain again. Is it feasible to implement preference management in workable phases? I see where they're going. Instead of launching a complete preference center out of the gate?
That's a great question. And so when you do start looking at that implementation, you'll find that a rational roadmap, an implementation plan is really the way to go. Not to be cliche, but there's that idea of eating an elephant, one bite at a time. And when you're looking at the transformational nature and culture shift to truly provide, that customer-driven experience and honoring that, you're going to find that with your systems, your people, and your processes, that it makes sense to break it into manageable steps, because it does take time to transform companies, particularly large, complex global organizations. So having a rational multi-phase deployment plan is definitely the way to go.
Good stuff. Well, I appreciate you answering those. I know we've got a little bit of time left, and we certainly want to be cautious. But if there are any other questions, feel free to send them in. If not, we just want everyone to know one more time, there's going to be the full recording sent in follow-up immediately after we conclude this session. And if I didn't say it enough times, we really appreciate everybody logging in, staying on board with us for almost the full hour. And we know questions come up and they might be long or they might be specific. We want to answer those, and we want to be the go-to for these challenges that you guys are seeing. So we'll conclude this today. Thank you for those that did ask a question. And one more time, thanks everybody in attendance. And Tom, great work. We appreciate all the preparation, that level of detail coming from you and your team. And hopefully that gives this audience a really good look into Possible Now and these challenges that we're facing today. So thanks, everyone. Have a great afternoon.